Is it everyone? Jacques from Dapper Shaves. We are going to do another video. It's most likely not going to turn into a honing video. This is more about a different topic to which we'll get shortly. So first of all, welcome to all the new subscribers, new viewers, people that's finding the content useful, and in particular those asking questions to get a better understanding of whatever the topic is. So much appreciated for that. One of the questions that keeps coming up, or not keeps coming up, something I want to maybe just clarify why this channel. So first of all is when I started wet shaving, I could not find technical detail beyond the basics. And so for me it was a trial and error, and so when I've eventually through trial and error and lots of experience come to realize certain things, technical aspects, I felt it's just my way of giving back to new people that might be in the same boat. So hopefully you find this channel useful and the content on that. The other thing is I'm an educator. I do educational stuff. I don't do reviews. I don't force anything down anybody's throat. I've got some opinions, but for me, my opinions are more suggestions or recommendations rather than an opinion. So I try and keep things as uncomplicated as possible. So that's that. So I've welcomed everybody, especially the new people, really appreciate it. So there's 3 questions we're going to cover. The first one, the best honing method. What is the best honing method? And this one is not specific with regards to stone type, but more a question around, should I be using flat stones or should I be using convex hones? So that is something I want to try. That's the main objective of this video, is have that little discussion, share some information, and then hopefully get to some kind of conclusion. Next question I get, do you service international customers? So no, it's not feasible in terms of costs, but always my experience and suggestions I'll share with anybody that's interested. So, sending razors abroad or whatever, even buying, for me personally, importing stuff from overseas have come to nothing for me. The importing cost and duties, I'm not sure if the rest of the world's experiencing the same, but it's just gone through the roof. It really doesn't make it feasible. So in that regard, no. And then my objective is obviously to give detailed educational content with an open and respectful approach. And that's essentially about me. If we're lucky and there's time left, I don't know how long this discussion is going to be. We're going to be setting a bevel on this using various stuff, and there's some other topics we'll talk about, including, if I get time, around rust, pitting on the edge, how it impacts edge performance and so forth. So that's a maybe. All right. So the following 2 sentences are quotes I've taken from somebody else. I don't know their name. So listen carefully, and this is with regards to flat stone honing and convex stone honing. So a flat stone will produce an apex consisting of 2 planes intersecting. The second one is, a convex hone will produce 2 concave planes intersecting at an apex. So if you've listened carefully, all it says is it's two different ways of setting the bevel. There are slight differences and nuances behind that, and that's what I'm going to try and explore in this video. All right, so the other important thing, at least for me, is understanding something is all in the details. So the more detail you have, I think the better choices you can make. So a question: why do razors shave different? So all honing things being equal, why do they shave different? So there's a couple of things. One is it's the technique and stone you use to do that, because that will have a very unique fingerprint and a characteristic. And then there's steel and a bunch of other stuff. But the other more important thing is razor design, right? And I think that is a topic people neglect a lot when they try and articulate some topics as honing methods and so forth. So we're going to do that. So things I want to cover is going to be razor designs and how they are grind, right? How that blade profile and shape looks like. And I've got some cited information I want to use because it's in that time period, so hopefully that's historically accurate. I don't know. A lot of the stuff on the internet is either true or false or somewhere in between, so it's never easy to know. So I'm not saying that is the truth. I'm just showing you some examples, and for me it makes sense. The second one you need to consider is bevel angles and the apex diameter when sharp, because that determines the effectiveness of an edge, how sharp that apex really is. We're going to have a look at the honing methods. Hopefully I'm going to have a conclusion that's going to be helpful around these two topics. And then a possible bonus on the razor honing and so forth. First, full of caveats. I am no expert in any particular field, all right? I can hone and I do shave and I've got skills, excellent skills, but I'm definitely not a master in everything, and specifically when it comes to convex honing, I might be uneducated. In that regard, I have asked the gurus in the industry, and I'm still not getting answers, and that's partly why I want to put out this video, because it's frustrating from a end user perspective. So I'm going to share my experiences, observations. Your mileage may vary, you might have a different view, and that's true. So use ChatGTP if you don't understand these things to derive an answer for you, but it's easier just using your own logic to derive a conclusion. Right, so you essentially, and I'm going to insert some pictures here of razor grinds coming specifically from Ulrich at Kurat Knives. He's understands that dynamics and the different grinds, especially historically, very well. And so he's got a catalog of choices. So I'm going to be showcasing some of those pictures. And also I'm going to have the cited information I use. We'll get to the gentleman now. He's got a little diagram of what he's doing then, and we'll cover that. But essentially, there's, and in context of this, so this gentleman, let's quickly go through it, George W. Korn, and he filed a patent in the United States on the 27th of June in 1901, serial number 66196. and a little valley in western New York. So I'm not going to read everything, but essentially he's talking about the dynamics behind the bellied razor, and he wants to patent that. Now, we'll get to that bit. So essentially, you get three types of razor grinds back then, with some variances. So there's the English hollow grind. So, and I'll explain that. A Hamburg concave, and then a bellied razor, which is his invention. So the first thing to understand with the grinds, and I'm going to insert a little picture here, and so I've got a reference what I'm talking about. So a hollow grind, English hollow grind, if you look at the diagram, is essentially B, that concave on the blade face. That is essentially all the way from A all the way to D. It doesn't stop at that belly for him. So it's one hollow that gets into a getting to a point at the apex. That's a traditional English hollow grind. A philharmonica is a good example of that. But I'll insert some pictures of that. So in that regard, it's a very thin grind. And I'm going to have to remind myself to cut away now again. So it's a very thin grind, right? And so it's a very, quite a flexible, thin edge. Philharmonica 14 is a great example of those. So what he says is an extra hollow grind, and I'm going to quote him. It says, which has concave faces that extend from the cutting edge to the very back of the blade. These have particularly ceased to retain their foothold upon the market. This was written in 1901. I'm quite sure it's a bit of everything, including some marketing bullshit, but we'll get to that. Because the vibratory characteristics of the edge, since the extended concavity made the cutting edge vibratory to such an extent as to render the instrument itself objectionably in use. So the cutting edge appears to lose its straight line and to assume apparently undulating form. So all he's saying is it's very flexible and it vibrates and it causes issues. The edge goes out of line, and moreover, it's going to jump and skip on your skin. I'll cover that when we get there, but essentially a DE blade is also a very thin blade, also very flexible, and that blade's essentially pinched between something and the cap or the guard, a fraction behind the cutting edge to give it that stability. So that's essentially what the bellied razor gives you, but he wants to claim his invention. And you guys might be thinking, Jock, you still haven't got to convex zones, and we'll get there. We need to understand the grinded dynamics of the different razors before we can have that discussion. So the second one is the Hamburg concave. And we are going to cut back into a picture so I can give it. But first let me read it. A Hamburg concave, quote, which has the back portion of the face concave with the edge portionally substantially convex, and which through producing a satisfactory cutting edge when new, was subject to serious objection that after short use it could no longer be honed, owing to the fact that the ridge or this convex part of the convexing portion would stand outside of the line drawn from the extreme back, which is the spine, to the extreme cutting edge, which I think is D, whereby preventing the edge from touching the hone. I quickly want to take a bit of water and then I'm going to describe you his invention, which is essentially the diagram I'm displaying. His patent, his patent bellied. I quote, "Now my invention seeks to utilize the principle of concavity at the cutting edge together with the principle of a thickening of the blade between the cutting edge and the back. And it consists of a blade which, starting from the back, has a concave portion which terminates on a ridge." Now he refers to this ridge later on as a rib. "From which the ridge towards the cutting edge, another concave portion is formed." All right, and for me that is the design behind a bellied razor and something Carl Frieder Ern actually invented 20 years before this. The ridge itself being within a line drawn from the back to the cutting edge so that the hone is always permitted. So, and that is that figure 2, that diagram, that's what he's trying to articulate. All right. So, and I'm going to show you quickly some real life examples from Ulrich around the Hamburg concave. Obviously, Ulrich's understand it, so he's geometry and stuff set up so that it isn't a problem. I'm also quite sure that concavity and not hitting the edge is also potentially maybe a bit of bollocks. But the other important thing to note specifically in Germany is if you've got that convex bit on that Hamburg ring and that becomes a problem, you want to use something like a convex hone to remove some of that material behind that convexity of that edge. Behind the convex, remove material of that so that you can start honing it. And maybe that was one of the reasons to introducing convex honing. Don't know, guessing. So I've said the inventor of the bellied razor is Carl Frieder Ern. He did that back in 1880, 1819s with the hex machine. The other important thing to know is Iwasaki-san talks about convex honing briefly, without any opinion or recommendation. And having said that, he used flat stones to hone on. Right, the next thing we need to consider, which we talked at the beginning, is a bevel angle and sharpness. All right, so D in the figure is essentially the apex, and A is the spine. And so if you do your mathematical geometry calculations, you use A and the length of that to determine the bevel angle, the inclusive bevel angle. So that is something that will never change when it's static. So the spine width and where it meets the edge, you're going to have a bevel angle. Now a razor bevel angle needs to be between 16 and 18 degrees as an optimum. If you go below that, the edge becomes very thin, brittle, and deforms very easy. If you go above that, the edge becomes very astute, and then it loses that cutting ability for a razor. Which brings me to the next point. Where the two planes meet at the apex, they talk about the apex diameter for sharpness. It's scientific. You can go and look it up. You don't need to believe me, but I'll drop in the measurements of that, or example of it. So a razor that can do hanging hairs and shaves well, that apex diameter is greater or less than 0.05 microns. Yes, correct. So if you hone a razor correctly and it passes, that's the diameter of the apex. So consider that. 16 degrees, if it's doing this and shaving well, that's roughly what the apex diameter is. All right. So we've spoken about the bevel angles and how that is measured and calculated. So honing methods. My personal thoughts in answering these questions and recommendations. So if you ask me, Jacques, so you've described a couple of things. So which one is best? So my first answer is there is no best. That is what makes logically sense for you and the method you want to explore. Both of them are going to give you great edges. They are going to shave well. They are going to do what they need to do. They are going to have different characteristics and will perform differently over time. So this is where you need to decide what is best for you. So, before I go further, I'm going to tell you what my recommendation is, all right, and then we'll continue. So mine is flat stones, all right. I don't need to justify it. It's something I use and prefer, and that's the way it is. So if we take convex stone and honing into relation with the examples and the information I've provided, so there's a couple of things. The first one I said I wanted to touch on is the traditional English hollow grind. So historically, and still today, hollow grinds is very thin, and the complaint was too much flex. I'm of the same opinion. I've got a Philharmonica, brutally sharp, very thin edge, and if you hit tough, dense spots and you're not on point, it can jump and skip a bit. Having said that, and I've shown this in my shaving videos, just change the direction of the razor slightly and it just plows through it like there's no tomorrow. So for me, in that regard, that very thin, flexible is not an issue. And so that's my view on thin and flexible. So first of all is I have asked the industry to give me some answers, the people in the industry, and I'm not getting them. So what I've said and presented here is based on my limited experience on convex honing. So for me, I understand convex honing to remove material from behind the edge. Right? So it's not taking material at the edge, even though if I think about it, it is going to take some material from behind the edge. How much that bevel angle changes, I cannot tell you. I'm quite sure some of you clever folks already done that calculation. So that's the first bit of my understanding. So The second one is if it does take material away from the apex and it changes that apex. So if you look at the figure and the bevel angle on that diagram is calculated at, let's say, 16 degrees, and it is true that convex honing then takes material away also from the edge and changes that bevel angle, then that bevel angle is going to reduce beyond 16 degrees. By how much? I don't know. I cannot tell you. I'm not the expert on this field. So if that is true, then my understanding is below 16, that edge longevity, the way the edge is going to flex and move and potentially deform, create cracks and chips and need to be refreshed more regularly, I think is a possibility. Those I've seen that make use of convex honing, obviously, first of all, enjoy honing, but they also seem, and I'm not sure if it's because of the enjoyment, refresh the edges a lot more regular than folk that use flat stones. I'm not sure if there's any correlation in that. Right, so the other thing is, so if you make that bevel, we all know thinner is sharper, all right? So my observation around sharpness is something that can be achieved very, very easy today and a whole lot easier back it was then. So maybe they complained they had with that ultra thinnish because they couldn't have that brutal sharp edges to really cut the hair, and that flexed and jumped, and maybe that's true. But today, getting sharp, you can get sharp really quickly. Getting sharp, if you've got good skills, is incredibly easy. However, for me it's a whole lot less important than smoothness. Smoothness in the edge makes a big, big difference. So if one of the reasoning is to get too sharp, I'm not quite on the same page. Getting an edge smooth and sharp for me is what you need to do, and I don't think a convex hone is going to do that for you, and I personally also don't think a flat synthetic stone is going to give you the same smoothness you're going to get off a natural whetstone. By the way, with the funds provided by you guys, I really appreciate it. I use that, and I've said I've purchased a translucent Arkansas, so I quickly want to show that, talking about sharpness and smoothness. Here we go. Is this in focus? This is the... So guys, we're back 3 days later. So my iPhone ran out of storage. Having said that, I always check my phone and I delete files when I'm done with them. I've only got a 64 gig phone, so I can essentially make 1.5 an hour, 40-minute recording, and then I'm done. So I checked, deleted all my stuff, recorded, and by coincidence and by luck, when I stood up to show you guys the translucent, when I looked up at the screen, I saw the video recording has stopped. So long story short, maybe I'll talk about the Apple problem when we're done here. But first of all is I just quickly need to recap to get my mind around where we are and so forth. So I think we got to a point where we spoke about a bevel angle and apex diameter versus sharpness, right? And I've indicated that if you've got to ask me which method I would recommend, it would be flat stones. And I started explaining why, but moreover, articulating my very limited understanding of convex honing. So the first thing I want to reaffirm is that my understanding is with convex honing is because that hone is convex. When you bring the razor across it, you essentially starting taking material away from just behind the edge, the apex. So that's the first one. And the second one is I still believe that if you do that, you are at some point in time going to hit the apex, and therefore you might slightly decrease the bevel angle, which one of the reasons people look at convex honing is to increase sharpness. So those are the things I understand. So for me, I've asked people in the industry, and they're not getting back to me. So part of the frustration on why I'm putting this out there. All right. So the other reason for using a convex hone is it is a fantastic. It is a good solution, a very good solution to razors that has got a slight warp in it. And the reason for that is because the hone's convex on both axes. You can target pretty much exactly where you want to hone. So for me, I've honed a few warped razors, and that is why I prefer narrower stones, because I've never seen a razor that warped that you can't hone on a stone like this. If you get a razor that warped, that is called a boomerang. In any case, so a narrow stone does that for me. So the extra effort in getting the stones convex just to look after a specific razor for me personally, not worth the time and effort. The other thing I quickly want to talk about is costs. So I do not have the means many of you guys have with regards to funds. So, even when I get funding, and we talked about this stone, this is essentially the very limit for me with regards to equipment. So, a half-inch stone, you are not going to convex. If you are, you're going to take a lot of the stone away just to get some kind of wheel and shape on this, particularly on both axes. So for me, with thinner stones, exactly the same thing. The longer the stone is, the bigger the problem becomes. Right, so, and this is the type of equipment I use and recommend because you can essentially do all of your honing on it. So that's the other reason for me. The other thing is wheel sizes, diameters. There's various wheel sizes and diameters all over the place. So once again, what is best and why is it best? I mean, there's guys that do extreme curves, super curve. Edison Carter, Bull, that stone profile is a whole lot more, and that's why it's called a super curve. Totally outside of what other people's doing. So for me, getting to what wheel size and so forth it doesn't work for me. It's all over the place. That's essentially what I want to get at. Maintaining a flat stone a whole lot easier. So sharpness, I quickly want to talk again about sharpness. Sharpness today is not a problem, right? If you can't get a razor sharp, extremely brutally sharp on a flat stone, synthetic, natural stone, it really doesn't matter, then a convex zone's not going to help you. You first need to get your skill up. So sharpness for me, using a convex zone is not an excuse for me. I get brutally sharp and smooth or flat stones. So I've heard people mention that a convex zone produces a smoother edge than the other stone. So once again, personally for me, smoothness comes from natural stones, honing technique, not the shape of the surface you're using to achieve that. Moreover, on sharpness, I've also seen people use stuff like chromium oxide, iron oxide, diamond sprays, CBN, there's a bunch of stuff to bump up sharpness. So guys, if you going to pastes and stuff to get your razor sharp, then you need to go back to the stones. You can get brutally sharp, incredibly good shave edges of stones. Once again, that shape or profile is not going to help in that regard. Moreover, for me, natural stones provides a smoother edge, at least for me, and so I can achieve that with flat. All right, so when you start looking at information around convex zones, there used to be a lot, and then some of that content got deleted. So that is unfortunate, and I'll tell you why. There's a lot of information that's presented in there, and which people share in their videos. And I don't want to go and look back at videos, other people's videos. And my point I want to make is, in the original descriptions and the people's comments and stuff, there's arguments, there's different perspectives, and things that different people come up with, mention and talk to debate it. So that turned ugly and it got deleted. So for me, it's not just what somebody else's view is, it's everybody else's view around it, different approaches and so forth, that gets one to think in a different way. So that's all lost, and that for me is quite sad. Is convex honing relevant today? Yes, of course. Many shavers out there flourish with these kind of edges. There's honers that enjoy going into that detail, that precision, and really enjoying that. For me, it's something I haven't tried. I've explained why I wouldn't go there, and moreover, I get the result. So let's move on. Yeah, I've talked about the frustration about the content being available, information not being available, being removed. And like I said, it's leaving everyone else deprived of different views, considerations that's not presented in the current content. So there's always two sides of a story in any case. So I think I've come to the conclusion about some of the things I understand. They might be wrong, and that's why I based my views on it in this video, so that you guys can go and do your own research, do your own understanding, compare, take bits and pieces from people which you find valuable. and come to your own conclusion. And moreover, you need to derive and come at your own experience. So there's information out there. You can ask me questions. I will respectfully answer them if they are positioned respectfully. And then that's it. So I've said in the beginning, there's two methods of honing to create shaving edges. Both produce sharp, smooth edges when you use good technique and have got an understanding of what you're doing. And I want to go back to those two opening statements, which is not mine, as I said, is cited. The first one is, a flat hone will produce an apex consisting of two planes intersecting. Yeah? Right? The second one, a convex hone will produce two concave planes, I can't bend my fingers like that, intersecting at apex. But you need to take material away, get to a fine apex that can take the impact of the task it's made for, in this case shaving, and that's what it needs to do. So that's it. I wanted to do a honing video, but I'm going to do separate. This video is turning a bit long. This razor requires a lot of work. So the next video I'll be doing straight after this, once I've uploaded and deleted this, I'm going to hone this razor. And we're specifically going to talk about rust and pitting, specifically at the edge. This razor's got it. We're going to keep working till we've removed that, and hopefully I can show you a couple of examples. And then when I'm done with that, another video I need to try and get out this weekend is these two cuticles, because I need to return them. I've been using them, classifying them, I believe, La Grise and the vein just next to it. I believe these two stones is in that class, so we'll have a look at them. And then I also want to start finishing some edges for you guys on the translucent Arkansas. A quick question I want to answer around the Arkansas. It's one I get quite a lot now that people know I've got the black and the translucent. And that question is, Jacques, which one's best? If you know me by now, you'll know there isn't any best. It's all understanding in the detail and using what you have to get to a great completion for you. That so the feedback of the translucent Arkansas for me is easier to feel and understand versus a black Arkansas. So in that regard, from a skill level experience, feedback, feel, textile type of feedback you rely on to hone, the black Arkansas is the more difficult one. But if you understand what you're doing, that goes out the window. So it's essentially feel and feedback. The other thing is, this stone likes a soapy solution, and oil actually might also work quite well. I just find oil maybe a little bit too thick, so glycerine with water dilution, or I like the soapy water on these stones, work fantastic. Same on the black Arkansas. With regards to edge quality, sharpness, smoothness, I can't tell a difference. So that's it. One other thing I did mention pastes the guys use to get to sharpness, but one thing I did not mention, some of the guys that also have got convex hones still hone with tape. Not all of them. and I can't understand that. So if you're trying to reduce bevel angle, but you add tape, you know, you're taking away and adding with a lot of work in between, and you're getting exactly the same result. So that's the other thing just to consider. So I hope you found this video useful. I am want to once again confirm that both methods work excellently. I've articulated how I understand it and what I perceive the value of the one system is being my perception of, and why I believe in the way I hone and the results I got, that is not really relevant for me. Right, guys, see you in some honing videos. Cheers.